Hello everybody. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to my Chilltopia. It is not a place. It is a state of mind. Hey, how's it going? Welcome, welcome. How would I pronounce that? Health real? Or is it health real? Health real? Welcome. Thank you for being here. Let's see, who else is here? Okay, that's it. Yeah, so I have these lights, but they're kind of screwed up now. Apparently, my remote for the TV works with it. I've had this thing for like 4 years. And you can see up here in this corner, I guess you can't really see with the window open. But yeah, anyway, it's messed up. Yeah. Bummer, but that's alright. I'm still gonna have it on back there, because that's what pro streamers do, right? Health is completely whole, absolutely. It's Norwegian, real, is real. Okay, cool, cool. Yeah, MP mentioned that you were Norwegian. That's awesome. We have people from all over in our Discord. Roar, hey, I am Roar. How are you doing? How's it going? All right, so I've got a few people here. I'm just gonna jump right into this. This book here is called Sabriel. It's been what, over 25 years. When did this come out? 96, 95, something like that. So yeah, it's been out a long time. And when I first discovered this book, I was 17. I was in this is when I lived in the Midwest, and I went to the St. Louis Children's Hospital. Got a customer. Okay, go get that customer. So I tell nothing but the truth, for better or worse. I'm the same way. Honest to a fault. Honest to a fault. Yeah. Sometimes it's a double-edged sword. You try to give people the truth, and sometimes they take advantage of it, you know, or they just make you feel bad about it. But that's okay, you know. Still be you. Still be true to you. That's what matters. So yeah, this book here came to me at a time when I was in St. Louis Children's Hospital. I was 17, and I'll just come out and say this is a mature place. This is for adults. But yeah, I was in a very low place where I thought I would try and take my life, and I took a whole bunch of Tylenol and didn't say anything about it, and they said approximately like 70, 80 tablets. It was a lot. It was a shitload, and it kind of, yeah, I was lucky. I would just say I was very lucky. Nothing is ever that serious where someone should even have to think about that. At the time, yeah, I was young. I didn't know better. So I didn't say anything to my parents. They found out the next day when I was, you know, throwing up and throwing up blood. And they took me to the hospital, and they put me on this little jet, and they flew me to St. Louis, which was a couple hours away from where we lived at the time. And it was too late they gave me stuff, this liquid. It was clear, and it was like, you know, it comes in like the cough syrup things that you have, and it was clear, and it smelled like sulfur. It smelled like rotten eggs. It was disgusting. And I had to take 2 like every couple hours. And they say your enzymes are supposed to be between 30 and 40. Mine was over 3,000, so it was pretty fucking severe. But I pulled through it. My body pulled through it. It messed me up, but I lived. So everything after the visit there, everything returned back to normal. Um, all my levels, everything, all my vitals and everything leveled out. And while I was there at this hospital, at this children's hospital, there was a woman that was pushing around a cart, a book cart, no, a cart that had a bunch of books on it. And out of all those books, this is the one I picked up. And so, yeah, it helped me. It brought me back. It made me realize that there's still stuff in life that is to be enjoyed. You know, that nothing is ever that serious. Time is all you need. They say time heals all wounds, and yeah, it may not seem like it if it's been, you know, months, years, decades, even. But that's okay. That's what people don't talk about, is that it's okay to take that long. And a lot of people say, you know, oh, you're going through this and you need to get over it. No, don't listen to that. You know, don't listen to somebody saying that, oh, it's been years ago, you should just get over it. That's old stuff. No, that shit hurts. And you gotta take time to heal. You gotta take time to grieve and get better. Let's catch up on chat. Let's see. Your book, I saw it posted on the Discord and mentioned that you saved you at some point. Yeah, it did. Do you struggle with the same thoughts still? No, I've recovered. Yeah, that was almost exactly 20 years ago. I'm almost 37. So, yeah, 20 years ago that happened, and 19 years ago. So yeah, I've definitely recovered. And since then, about 4 years ago, my cousin, who's a couple years older than my mom, he actually took his life. And, you know, his dog now lives with us. So if you see in our Discord that looks like a golden pit bull in the pictures under pets, that was his dog, and so we took her in. But yeah, he took his life, and so, and even his son did the same. And a couple years ago, my ex, her little brother, who was only 16, he took his life. So yeah, eventually you get to a point where you just want to help people. You don't want anyone to feel that way, you know. So anyway, to the book. I mean, where are you today? Situation. I'm with my parents. You know, it's a tough economy. It's a tough world right now, and prices are going up and everything. But I'm very fortunate to have parents that care for me and will allow me to stay with them. And all these posters I haven't really seen in like 20 years or 15 years probably. I moved here about 8 years ago, and we were taking care of my grandmother. This is technically my grandmother's house. She passed away. She had end-stage Alzheimer's. So I was here the whole time and watched the whole, you know, degradation and everything that happens with that. From the part when I first got here, where she was just telling stories over and over, to the point where she was in, you know, we had a hospital bed brought in, and she was nonverbal, couldn't walk, couldn't speak, couldn't eat, feed herself, change herself, anything. And so we all, you know, me, my mom, and stepdad, we all chipped in and took care of her. And that too will change you. It will totally change you. So yeah, I just want to share this book because it's an amazing story. To some it might be a little too much, but it is technically a youth novel, I guess you could say, or young adult, or whatever. So it's not too gruesome, but it kind of It's more kind of like on the lines. I haven't really read Harry Potter. I've watched the movies, maybe all the way through. I think all of them. I don't know. There's a lot. Um, but if I were to say what this book is like, I would say something like that, but with like something similar to necromancers and such instead of witches and warlocks and stuff. It's more like mages and yeah. Anyway, so thank you all for being here. I'm going to go ahead and jump into this. Man, my frames are really dropping. Let me see here. Game capture. I think I can turn that off. Widget window, that's fine. I had a chat widget window up here on the side. Oh, on this side here. I turned that off because it was messing with my frames. It was really slowing me down. So let's see. This should be. I don't think anything else is running. I have a very old computer. So I'm just doing what I can with it. Alright. So this is Sabriel by Garth Nix. Prologue. It was little more than 3 miles from the wall into the Old Kingdom, but that was enough. Noonday sunshine could be seen on the other side of the wall in Celestier, and not a cloud in sight. Here, there was a clouded sunset, and a steady rain had just begun to fall. Coming faster than the tents could be raised, the midwife shrugged her cloak up against her neck and bent over the woman again, raindrops spilling from her nose onto the upturned face below. The midwife's breath blew out into a cold cloud of white, but there was no answer billowing from the air from her patient. The midwife sighed and slowly straightened up, that single movement telling the watchers everything they needed to know. The woman who had staggered into their forest camp was dead, only holding on to life long enough to pass it on to the baby at her side. But even as the midwife picked up the pathetically small form beside the dead woman, it shuddered within its wrappings and was still. "The child, too?" asked one of the watchers, a man who wore a mark of the charter fresh drawn in wood ash upon his brow. "Then there shall be no need for a baptism." MP! Hey, this is your third time hearing this. Oh, thanks for being here, man. His head went up to brush the mark from his forehead, and then suddenly stopped as a pale white hand gripped his and forced it down in a single swift motion. "Peace," said a calm voice. "I wish you no harm." The white hand released its grip, and then the speaker stepped into the ring of firelight. The others watched over him without welcome. The hands of the half-sketched charter marks or gone to the bowstrings and hilts did not relax. The man strode towards the bodies and looked upon them. Then he turned to face the watchers, pushing his hood back to reveal someone who had taken paths far from sunlight, for his skin was deathly white. "I am called Abhorsen," he said, as his words sent ripples through the people about him, as if he had cast a large, weighty stone into a pool of stagnant water. "And there will be a baptism tonight." The charter mage looked down on the bundle in the midwife's hand and said, "The child is dead, Abhorsen. We are travelers. Our life lived under the sky, and it was often harsh. We know death, Lord." "Not as I do," replied Abhorsen, smiling as his paper-white face crinkled at the corners and drew back from his equally white teeth. "And I say the child is not yet dead." The man tried to meet Abhorsen's gaze, but faltered and looked away at his fellows. None moved or made us any sign, till the woman said, "So, it is easily done. Sign the child, Ariel. We will make a new camp in Leovi's Ford. Join us when you are finished here." The charter mage inclined his head to assent, and the others drifted away to pack up their half-moved camp, slow with the reluctance of having to move, but filled with the greater reluctance to remain near Abhorsen, for his name was one of secrets and unspoken fears. When the midwife went to lay the child down and leave, Abhorsen spoke. "Wait, you will be needed." The midwife looked down on the baby and saw that it was a girl child and, save for its stillness, could be merely sleeping. She had heard of Abhorsen, and if the girl could live, warily she picked up the child again and held it out to the charter mage. "If the charter does not," began the man, but Abhorsen held up his pallid hand and interrupted. "Let us see what the charter wills." The man looked at the child again and sighed. Then he took a small bottle from his pouch and held it aloft, crying out a chant that was the beginning of a charter, one that listed all things that lived, or grew, or once lived, or would live again, and the bonds that held them all together. As he spoke, the light came to the bottle, pulsing with the rhythm of the chant. Then the chanter was silent. He touched the bottle to the earth, then to the sign of wood ash on his forehead, and then upended it over the child. A great flash lit the surrounding woods as the glowing liquid splashed over the child's head, and the priest cried, "By the charter that binds all things, we name thee!" Normally, the parents of the child would then speak the name. Here, only Abhorsen spoke, and he said, "Sabriel." As he uttered the words, the wood ash disappeared from the priest's forehead and slowly formed on the child's. The charter had accepted the baptism. But she is dead!" exclaimed the charter mage, gingerly touching his forehead to make sure the ash was truly gone. He got no answer, for the midwife was staring across the fire at Abhorsen, and Abhorsen was staring at nothing. His eyes reflected in dancing the flames, but did not see them. Slowly, the chill mist began to rise from his body, spreading toward the man and midwife, who scuttled to the other side of the fire, wanting to get away, but now too afraid to run. He could hear the child crying, which was good. Oh, let me pause here. Need a drink. Everybody good so far? Okay. He could hear the child crying, which was good. If she had gone beyond the first gateway, he could not bring her back without more strenuous preparations and a subsequent delusion of her spirit. The current was strong, but he knew this branch of the river, and waded past pools and eddies that hoped to drag him under. Already he could feel the waters leeching his spirit, but his will was strong, so they took only the color, not the substance. He paused to listen, and hearing the crying diminish, hastened forward. Perhaps she was already at the gateway and about to pass. The first gate was a veil of mist, with a single dark opening where the river poured into the silence beyond. Abhorsen hurried towards it and then stopped. The baby had not yet passed through, but only because something had caught her and picked her up. Standing there, looming up out of the black waters, was a shadow darker than the gate. It was several feet higher than Abhorsen, and there were pale marsh lights burning where you would expect to see eyes, and the fetid stench of a carrion rolled off it, a warm stench that relived the chill of the river. Abhorsen advanced on the thing slowly, watching the child it held loosely in the crook of its shadowed arm. The baby was asleep, but restless, and it squirmed towards the creature, seeking a mother's breast, but it only held her away from itself, as if the child were hot or caustic. Slowly, Abhorsen drew a small silver handbell from the bandolier of bells across his chest, and cocked his wrist to ring it. But the shadow thing held the baby up and spoke in a dry, slithery voice, like a snake on gravel.
"Spirit of my spirit, Abhorsen, you can't spell me while I hold her, and perhaps I shall take her beyond the gate, as her mother has already gone."
Abhorsen frowned in recognition and replaced the bell. "So, you have a new shape, Carigor? And you were now this side of the first gate? Who was foolish enough to assist you so far?" Carigor smiled widely, and Abhorsen caught a glimpse of fires burning deep in his mouth.
"One of the usual calling," he croaked, "but unskilled. He didn't realize it would be in the nature of an exchange. At last, his life was not sufficient for me to pass the last portal, but now you have come to help me."
"I, who chained you beyond the seventh gate?"
"Yes," whispered Carigor. "The irony does not, I think, escape you. But if you want the child—"
He made as if to throw the baby into the stream, and then, with a jerk, woke her. Immediately she began to cry, and her little fists reached out to gather up the shadow stuff of Carigor, like the folds of a robe. He cried out, tried to detach her, but the tiny hands held tightly, and he was forced to overuse his strength, and threw her from him. She landed, squalling, and was instantly caught up by the flow of the river. But Abhorsen lunged forward, snatching her from both the river and Carigor's grasp. Stepping back, he drew the silver bell one-handed and swung it so it sounded twice. The sound was curiously muffled, but true, and the clear chime hung in the air, fresh and cutting, alive. Carigor flinched at the sound and fell backwards to the darkness that was the gate.
"Some fool will bring me back, and then—"
he cried out, as the river took him under. The water swirled and gurgled, and then resumed their steady flow. Abhorsen stared at the gate for a time, and sighed, and placed the bell back in his belt. Looking at the baby held in his arm, she stared back at him, dark eyes matching his own. Already the color had been drained from her skin. Nervously, Abhorsen laid a hand across the brand on her forehead and felt the glow of her spirit within. The charter mark had kept her life contained when the river should have drained it. It was her life spirit that had so burned Carigor. She smiled up at him and gurgled a little, and Abhorsen felt a smile tilting the corner of his own mouth. Still smiling, he turned and began the long wade back up the river to to the gate that would return them both to their living flesh. The baby wailed, and scant second before Abhorsen opened his eyes, so that the midwife was already halfway around the dying fire, ready to pick her up. Frost crackling on the ground, and icicles hung from Abhorsen's nose. He wiped them with his sleeve, and leaned over the child, much as any anxious father does after a birth. "How is the babe?" he asked, and the midwife stared at him wonderingly, for the dead child was now loudly alive, as deathly white as he. "As you hear, my lord," she answered. "She is very well. It is perhaps a little cold for her." He gestured at the fire and spoke a word, and it roared into life, the frost melting at once, the raindrops sizzling into steam. "That will do till morning," said Abhorsen. "Then I shall take her to my house. I have need of a nurse. Will you come?" The midwife hesitated, and looked at the charter mage, who still lingered on the far side of the fire. He refused to meet her gaze, and she looked down once more at the little girl bawling in her arms. You are, whispered the midwife. "A necromancer?" answered Abhorsen. "Only of a sort. I love the woman who lies here. She would have lived if she had loved another, but she did not. Sabriel is our child. Can you not see the kinship?" Lude. The midwife looked at him as he leant forward and took Sabriel from her, rocking her on his chest. The baby quieted, and in a few seconds was asleep. "Yes," said the midwife, "I shall come with you and look after Sabriel, but you must find a wet nurse." "And I dare say much else besides," mused Abhorsen. "But my house is not a place for—" The charter mage cleared his throat and moved around the fire. "If you seek a man who knows a little of the charter," he said hesitantly, "I should wish to serve, for I have seen its work in you, lord though I am loath to leave my fellow wanderers." Perhaps you will not have to," replied Abhorsen, smiling at a sudden thought. "I wonder if your leader will object to 2 new members joining her band. For my work means I must travel, and there is no part of the kingdom that has not felt the imprint of my feet." "Your work?" asked the man, shivering a little, though it was no longer cold. "Yes," said Abhorsen. "I am a necromancer, but not of the common kind. Where others of the art raise the dead, I lay them back to rest. And those that will not rest, I bind, or try to. I am Abhorsen." He looked at the baby again and added, almost with a note of surprise, "Father of Sabriel." We've got plenty of time. Catch up on chat. Earlier, maybe around 2000. This was 96 or 95. It says 96, but I think it was before that. I think it was 95. Yeah, first published in 95, yeah, so I was 10, but I didn't find it till I was 17. Yes, dad dance. My thing ran out. I would, yeah, spam some dad dancing because, yeah, definitely, it's a bummer I'm out. My subscription ran out, like, I think yesterday or day before. Good luck catching up on this, Kriz. Hey. Oh, he's gonna blow me up. That's cool. I got the chat thing off here now. It's no longer slowing me down. Are you ready for chapter 1? Like, seriously, we're jumping right into this, and probably chapter 2, maybe, if we got time. I mean, we're only a half hour in, 35 minutes in. We've got plenty of time. These chapters go by like 20, 25, 30 minutes a piece. Something like that, depending on how fast I read. How much I mess up. Alright, so, let's do a quick recap of what happened. Apparently, there was a woman and a baby. The woman didn't make it. The baby almost didn't make it. Abhorsen, I guess you could say, crossed over into death, or into the realm between the real, or living and dead world. Imagine it as a long river with a gate, and then followed by several gates after that. So by each gate you go through is further into death or whatever. Just briefly, this is not a spoiler or anything like that. It's just give you an idea of what's actually happening. So he has the ability to go through these gates unlike other people. He's a necromancer of sorts. So he doesn't really go around raising the dead. He goes putting the dead back down. So that's the whole thing in a nutshell. Lightning crashes and old mother dies. Lightning crashes and baby cries. Oh man. Here we go. I hope you're ready. Who all is here? Just 2 people. Okay. Thank you, 2 people. Can you turn off the fan in the background? It's making a hell of a lot of noise. Let me see here. I have to have the fan on though, but I can do that. Is that good? That's gonna have to be good there. I'll come a little bit closer. Think of it as natural ambience for the microphone. Kriz might need to noise gate or noise suppress eventually. Yeah, it's that, or unplug the thing like this and then it starts overheating. But yeah, I have to have maybe. Hang on. Maybe I can so maybe I can prop it up like this, but I don't really have anything. Where's a pencil? That better? Yeah, it's a fan that goes underneath the laptop. Yeah, so I've got the... It's a big square thing that sits underneath the laptop that's at an angle so that it can sit and get air underneath. So I just put a pencil between the fan and the laptop itself. That does seem like a little bit better compared to this, doesn't it? That seems louder, just from where I'm sitting. But this, that does sound a little bit quieter, right? Is that better? Give me a thumbs up, just say, yeah, good, great. It's like having a headache. It's giving me a headache. Oh man, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not gonna overheat my computer though, I'm sorry. I had it happen the other time and it shut down. It completely froze up. I was in the middle of a stream and I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to get a fan right under here. Alright, chapter 1. See, I had headphones, but I don't know where they went. I have my other Bluetooth one and the sound was like 10 times worse than it is right now because it was like crackling while it was streaming. It just took a... Everything was like glitchy sounding. I don't think I have other headphones. Let me turn this up and see how bad it is. Testing, testing, testing. Let me turn this up and see. Testing, testing, testing. Let me turn this up and see. It's not too bad. It's not that bad. Testing, testing, testing. Do you have headphones on, or do you have it like all the way up? Because if you turn it about halfway, I can't even hear the fan. Yeah, if you have it all the way up, yeah. Alright, I'm going into chapter 1. Because I've been waiting so long. Computer has a built-in fan? No, it does not. This is a very cut-back laptop. It's like a notepad, like for like studying and shit. It's not even it's like a 1.8 gigahertz or 1.6 gigahertz. It's dual core. It can't even record and take a fart at the same time. It's so ridiculous. Like if I were to click on a game right now, it would slug down. I have to turn off my camera in order to play a game. It's terrible. It's really bad. Alright, so like I don't want this to sound like crap. Alright, so like I don't want this to sound like crap. Alright, I'm just gonna monitor it. Yeah, let me turn this down. Alright, I'll monitor it. If it gets if it gets too hot, I'm putting it back on. No. Or I could just take that fan and I think that one would be quieter. No, I've got a plug here, and a plug there, and a plug there. That's pretty loud too. I could just do this. Alright, let's try that. Do you have Snap? I could show you quick. No, I don't have Snap. Sorry. Champions of Peoples. Okay, let's see if that'll work. Yeah, if it gets too crazy, I got a little fan right here. So, alright. Time. Yeah, I don't want to waste too much time because I want to get into this. Chapter 1. Finally, Chapter 1. Yeah, ceiling fan's very quiet. The rabbit had been run over minutes before. Its pink eyes were glazed and blood-stained its clean white fur. Unnaturally clean fur, for it had just escaped from a bath. It still smelt faintly of lavender water. A tall, pale, curiously pale young woman stood over the rabbit. Her night-black hair, fashionably bobbed, was hanging slightly over her face. She wore no makeup or jewelry, save for her enameled school badge pinned to her regulation navy blazer. That, coupled with her skirt, stockings, and sensible shoes, identified her as a schoolgirl. A nameplate under the badge read Sabriel, and the Roman VI, and Gilt Crown proclaimed her to be a member of both a member of the sixth form and a prefect. The rabbit was unquestionably dead. Sabriel looked up from it and back along the bricked drive that left the road and curved up to an imposing pair of wrought iron gates. A sign above the gate in gilt letters of mock Gothic announced that they were the gates of Waverley College. Smaller letters added that the school was established in 1652 for young ladies of quality. A small figure was busy climbing over the gate, nimbly avoiding the spikes that were supposed to stop such activities. She dropped the last few feet and started running, her pigtails flying, shoes clacking the bricks. Her head was down to gain momentum, but as cruising speed was established, she looked up and saw Sabriel and the dead rabbit and screamed, "Bunny!" Sabriel flinched as the girl screamed, hesitated for a moment, then bent down by the rabbit's side and reached out with one pale hand to touch it between its long ears. Her eyes closed and her face set as if she had suddenly turned to stone. A faint whistling sound came from her slightly parted lips, like the wind heard from far away. Frost formed on her fingertips and rimmed the asphalt around beneath her feet and knees. The other girl, running, saw her slightly tip forward over the rabbit and topple towards the road. But at the last minute, her hand came out and caught herself. A second later, she had regained her balance and was using both hands to restrain the rabbit, a rabbit now inexplicably lively again, its eyes bright and shiny, as eager to be off as when it escaped from its bath. "Bunny!" shrieked the young girl again, as Sabriel stood up, holding the rabbit by the scruff of its neck. "Oh, thank you, Sabriel. I heard the car skidding. I thought—" She faltered as Sabriel handed the rabbit over. The blood stained her expectant hands. "He'll be fine. What is it? Jasoneth? Jasoneth. He'll be fine, Jasoneth," Sabriel replied wearily. "A scratch. It's already closed up." Jasoneth examined Bunny carefully, then looked up at Sabriel. The beginnings of a wrinkled fear showed back up in her eyes. "There isn't anything under the blood," stammered Jackanath. "What did you—" "I didn't," snapped Sabriel. "But perhaps you could tell me what were you doing out of bounds?" "Chasing Bunny," replied Jackanath, her eyes clearing as life reverted to a more normal situation. "You see—" "No excuses," recited Sabriel. "Remember what Miss Umbre said at the assembly on Monday?" "It's not an excuse," insisted Janet. "It's a reason." You can explain that to Miss Umbre then." "Oh, Sabriel, you wouldn't. You knew I was only chasing Bunny. I'd never have come out." Sabriel held up her hand to mock defeat and gestured back to the gates. "If you're back inside within 3 minutes, I won't have seen you. And open the gate this time. They won't be locked till I go back inside." Jasoneth smiled. I keep changing her name. Jasoneth. Jackanath, where were we? Jackanath smiled, her whole face beaming, whirled around and sped up the drive. Bunny clutched against her neck. Sabriel watched till she had gone through the gate. Then, let the tremors take her till she was bent over shaking with cold. A moment of weakness, and she had broken the promise she had made both to herself and her father. It was only a rabbit, and Jackanath loved it so much. But what would it lead to? It was no great step from bringing back a rabbit to bringing back a person. Worse, it had been so easy. She had caught the spirit right at the wellspring of the river, and had returned it with barely a gesture of power, patching the body with simple charter symbols as they stepped from death to life. She hadn't even needed bells, or the other apparatuses, of the necromancer. Only a whistle and her will. Death and what came after death was no great mystery to Sabriel. She just wished it was. Let me get a drink here. Still sounding good? Everything sounding good? Okay, seems alright. Good for now. It was Sabriel's last term in Waverly. The last 3 weeks, in fact. She had graduated already, coming first in English, equal first in music, third in mathematics, seventh in science, second in fighting arts, and fourth in etiquette. She had already been a runaway first in magic, but that wasn't printed on the certificate. Magic only worked in those regions of Alestier close to the wall, which marked the border with the Old Kingdom. Farther away, it was considered to be quite beyond the pale, if it existed at all, and persons of repute did not mention it. Waverly College was only 40 miles from the wall, had a good all-round reputation, and taught magic to those students who could obtain special permission from their parents. Excuse me. Okay, thank you. Sabriel's father had chosen it for that reason. When he had emerged from the Old Kingdom with a 5-year-old girl in tow to seek a boarding school, he had paid in advance for that first year the Old Kingdom's silver deniers that stood up to surreptitious touches with cold iron. Thereafter, he had come to visit his daughter twice a year, at midsummer and midwinter, staying for several days on occasion, and always bringing more silver. Understandably, the headmistress was very fond of Sabriel, particularly since she never seemed troubled by her father's rare visitations, as most other girls would be. Once, Miss Umbre had asked Sabriel if she minded, and had been troubled by the answer that Sabriel saw her father more than when he was actually there. Miss Umbre didn't teach magic, and didn't want to know any more about it other than the pleasant fact that some parents would pay considerable sums to have their daughters schooled in the basics of sorcery and enchantment. Miss Umbre didn't want to know how Sabriel saw her father. Sabriel, on the other hand, always looked forward to his unofficial visits and watched the moon tracing its movement from a leather-bound almanac which listed the phases of the moon in both kingdoms and gave valuable insights into the seasons, tides, and other ephemera that were never the same at any one time on both sides of the wall. A portion sending of himself always appeared at the dark of the moon. How would you guys like to see a quick look at the map, just so you know what we're talking about. I don't know how well you're going to see this, but let me see here. Okay, right here is the college. Oops, right there. That's the college, and there's the wall, that long wall, and then there's the old kingdom. So they're here in Cestier, on this side of the wall. So just to give you an idea. Okay, so Abhorsen's sending of himself always appeared at the dark of the moon. On these nights, Sabriel would lock herself into her study, a privilege of the sixth form. Previously, she'd had to sneak into the library. Put the kettle on the fire, drink tea, and read the book until the characteristic wind rose up, extinguished the flame, and put out the electric light and rattled the shutters. All necessary preparations, it seemed, for her father's phosphorescent sendings to appear in the spare armchair. Sabriel was particularly looking forward to her father's visit that November. It would have been his last, because college was about to end, and she wanted to discuss her future. Miss Umbre wanted her to go to the university, but that meant moving further away from the old kingdom. Her magic would wane, and parental visitations would be limited to actual physical appearances, and those might become even less frequent. On the other hand, going to the university would mean staying with some of the friends she had virtually all her life. Should be a no in there, right? Some of her friends she'd had virtually all her life. Yeah. Girls she'd started school with at the age of 5. There would also be a much greater world of social interaction, particularly with young men, of which commodity there was a distinct shortage around Waverly College. And the disadvantage of losing her magic could possibly be offset by the lessening of her affinity for death and the dead. Sabriel was thinking of this as she waited, book in hand, half-drunk cup of tea balanced precariously on the arm of the chair. It was almost midnight, and Abhorsen hadn't appeared. Sabriel checked the almanac twice, and had even opened the shutters to peer out through the glass at the sky. It was definitely the dark of the moon, but there was no sign of him. It was the first time in her life that he hadn't appeared, and she felt suddenly uneasy. Sabriel rarely thought about what life was really like in the old kingdom, but now old stories came to mind, and dim memories of when she lived there with the travelers. Abhorsen was a powerful sorcerer, but even then... Sabriel! Sabriel! A high-pitched voice interrupted her thought, quickly followed by a hasty knock and a rattle of the doorknob. Sabriel sighed, pushed herself out of her chair, caught the teacup, and unlocked the door. A young girl stood on the other side, twisting her nightcap from side to side in trembling hands, her face white with fear. "Olin!" she exclaimed. "What is it? Is Susan sick again?" "No," sobbed the girl. "I heard noises behind the tower door, and I thought it was Ribisi and Ela having a midnight feast without me. So I looked." "Oh, Ribis. I'm sorry." "What?" exclaimed Sabriel, alarmed. "No one opened the doors in the middle of the night, not this close to the old kingdom." "I'm sorry," cried Owen. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know why I did. It wasn't Rebis or Ela. It was a black shape, and it tried to get in. I slammed the door." Sabriel threw the teacup aside and pushed past Olin. She was already halfway down the corridor before she heard the porcelain smash behind her, and Olin's horrific gasp at such cavalier treatment of good china. She ignored it and broke into a run, slapping on the light of the switches as she ran towards the open door of the west dormitory. As she reached it, screams broke out inside, rapidly crescendoing to a hysterical chorus. There are 40 girls in the dormitory, most of the first form, all under the age of 11. Sabriel took a deep breath and stepped into the doorway, fingers crooked in the spell-casting stance. Even before she looked, she felt the presence of death. Oh wow, no, I haven't. Thank you. I've never ever considered anything like that. I've always been very insecure about my reading because I grew up with a lisp and my whole life, and a lot of kids gave me shit when I was in school, and that was kind of like the one thing I didn't like to do was read in front of the class, and here I am reading in front of you all. So, it's that's sometimes just how life works, But no, I've never thought of anything like that. Person of many talents, thank you, MP. Yeah, it's only been like a month or two, hasn't it? Yeah, it's not been long. Cavalier treatment. Yes. Cavalier treatment of good china. Okay. Even before she looked, she felt the presence of death. The dormitory was very long and narrow, with a low roof and small windows. Beds and dressers lined each side, and at the far end the door led to the west tower steps. It was supposed to be locked inside and out, but locks rarely prevailed against powers of the old kingdom. The door was open, and an intensely dark shape stood there, as if someone had cut a man-shaped figure out of the night, carefully choosing a piece devoid of stars. It had no features at all, but the head quested from side to side, as if whatever its senses did possess worked in a narrow range. Whatever senses it did possess worked in a narrow range. Curiously, it carried an absolute mundane sack in one four-fingered hand, a rough woven cloth in stark contrast of its own surreal flesh. Sabriel's hands moved in a complicated gesture, drawing the symbols of the charter that... Hold on. That intimidated sleep. Sorry, it was cut off there. That intimidated sleep, quiet, and rest. With a flourish, she indicated both sides of the dormitory and drew one of the master symbols, drawing all together. Instantly, every girl in the room stopped screaming and slowly subsided back to their bed. The creature's head stopped moving, and Sabriel knew its attention was now centered on her. Slowly it moved, lifting one clumsy leg forward, swinging... Slowly it moved, lifting one clumsy leg and swinging it forward, resting for a moment, then swinging the other a little past the first. The lumbering, rolling motion that made an eerie shuffling noise on a thin carpet. As it passed each bed, the electrical lights above them flared once and went out. Upside down. This was way before Stranger Things. Sabriel let her hands fall to her side and focused her eyes to the center of the creature's torso, feeling the stuff of which it was made. She had come without any of her instruments or tools, but that led to only a moment's hesitation before she let herself slip over the border into death, her eyes still on the intruder. The river flowed around her legs, cold as always, the light gray and without warmth, still stretched to an entirely flat horizon. In the distance, she could hear the roar of the first gate. She could see the creature's true shape clearly now, not wrapped in the aura of death which it carried to the living world. It was an old kingdom Desian, vaguely humanoid, but more like an ape than a man, and obviously only semi-intelligent. But there was more to it than that. When Sabriel felt the clutch of fear, as she saw the black thread that came from the creature's back and ran into the river. Ooh. Somewhere beyond the first gate, or even further, that umbilical rested in the hands of an adept. As long as that thread existed, the creature would be totally under the control of its master, who could use its senses and spirit as it saw fit. Something tugged at Sabriel's physical body, and she reluctantly twitched her senses back to the living world, a slight feeling of nausea rising in her as a wave of warmth rushed over her death-chilled body. "What is it?" said a calm voice close to Sabriel's ear. An old voice, tinged with the power of charter magic. Miss Greenwood, the magistrix of the school. "It's a dead servant, a spirit form," replied Sabriel, her attention back on the teacher. It was halfway down the dorm. She single-mindedly rolled one leg after the other, still single-mindedly rolling one leg after the other. Without free will, something sent it back to the living world. It's controlled from beyond the first gate. "Why is it here?" asked the magistrix. Her voice sounded calm, but Sabriel felt the charter symbols gathering in her voice, forming on her tongue, symbols that would unleash lightning and flame the destructive powers of the earth. "It's not obviously malign, nor has it attempted any actual harm," replied Sabriel slowly, just like I did, her mind working over the possibilities. She was used to explaining purely necromantic aspects of magic to Miss Greenwood. The magistrix had taught her charter magic, but necromancy was definitely not on the syllabus. Sabriel had learned more than she wanted to know about necromancy from her father and the dead themselves. "Don't do anything for a moment. I will attempt to speak with it." Your inner demons are stressing you. Like top 10%. You need not giving a fuck. Yeah, I'm pretty good at perfecting the art of not giving a fuck. I think for the most part. But yeah, I do have a conscience as fade away, calm down, it's nothing serious. Yep. I need a drink. It's getting serious now. A cold washed over her again. biting onto her as the rougher river gushed around her legs, eager to pull her over and carry her away. Sabriel exerted her will, and the cold became simply a sensation, without danger, a current merely a pleasing vibration about her feet. The creature was close now, as it was in the living world. Sabriel held out both her hands and clapped, the sharp sound echoing for longer than it would anywhere else. Before the echo died, Sabriel whistled several notes, and they echoed too, sweet sounds within the harshness of the handclap. The thing flinched at the sound and stepped back, putting both hands on its ears. As it did so, it dropped the sack. Sabriel stared in surprise. She hadn't noticed the sack before, possibly because she hadn't expected it to be there. Very few inanimate things existed in both realms, the living and the dead. She was even more surprised as the creature suddenly bent forward and plunged into the water, hands searching for the sack. It found it almost at once, but not without losing its footing. As the sack surfaced, the current forced the creature under. Sabriel breathed a sigh of relief as she saw it slide away, and then gasped as its head broke the surface and it cried out, "Sabriel, my messenger, take the sack." The voice was Abhorsen's. Sabriel ran forward, and an arm pushed out towards her. The neck of the sack clutched in its fingers. She reached out, missed, and then tried again. The sack was securely in her grasp. As the current took the creature completely under, Sabriel looked after it, hearing the roar of the first gate suddenly increase, as it always did when someone passed its falls. She turned and started the slog back against the current to the point where she could easily return to life. The sack in her hands was heavy, and there was a leading feeling in her stomach. Leadening feeling in her stomach. If the messenger was truly Abhorsen's, then he himself was unable to return to the realm of the living, and that meant he was either dead or trapped by something that should have passed beyond the final gate. Once again, the wave of nausea overcame her, and Sabriel felt her knees shaking. She could feel the magistrate's hand on her shoulder, but her attention was fastened on the sack she held in her hand. She didn't need to look to know that the creature was gone. Its manifestation into the living world had ceased as its spirit had gone past the first gate. Only a pile of grave mold would remain. It would to be swept aside in the morning. "What did you do?" asked the magistrate, as Sabriel brushed her hands through her hair, ice crystals falling from her hands onto the sack that lay in front of her knees. "It had a message for me," replied Sabriel. "So I took it." She opened the sack and reached inside. A sword hilt met her grasp, so she drew it out, still scabbarded, and put it to one side. She didn't need to draw to see the charter symbols etched along its blade. The dull emerald in its pommel and the well-worn bronze-plated crossguard were as familiar to her as the school's uninspired cutlery. It was Abhorsen's sword. A leather bandolier she drew out next was an old brown belt and hand's brethren width, which always smelled faintly of beeswax. 7 tubular leather pouches hung from it, starting with one the size of a small pill bottle, growing larger till the 7th was almost the size of a jar. The bandolier was designed to be worn across the chest, with the pouches. Oh my gosh, I don't have my picture on. I can't believe I haven't had this on. Oh my gosh. That's so pathetic. Okay, yeah, this is what I'm reading over here. See? Yeah, right there. Oh, the bandolier was designed to be worn across the chest with the pouches hanging down. Sabriel opened the smallest and pulled out the tiny silver bell with a dark, deeply polished mahogany handle. She held it gently, but the clapper still swung slightly, and the bell made a high, sweet note that somehow lingered in the mind, even after the sound was gone. "Father's instruments," whispered Sabriel. "The tools of a necromancer." "But there are charter marks engraved on the bell, and the handle," interjected the magistrix, who was looking down with fascination. "Necromancy is free magic, not governed by the charter." "Father's was different," replied Sabriel, distantly. Still staring at the bell she held in her hand, thinking of her father's brown linen hands holding the bells. Binding, not raising. He was a faithful servant of the charter. "You're going to be leaving us, aren't you?" said the magistrate, said suddenly, as Sabriel replaced the bell and stood up, sword in one hand, bandolier in the other. "I just saw it in the reflection of your bell." "Oh, sorry. I just saw it in the reflection of your bell. You were crossing the wall." "Yes, into the old kingdom," said Sabriel without realization. "Something has happened to my father, but I'll find him. So I swear by the charter I bear." She touched the charter mark on her forehead, which glowed briefly and then faded so that it might never have been seen. The magistrate nodded and touched a hand to her own forehead, where a glowing mark suddenly obscured all the patterns of time. As it faded, rustling noises and faint whispers began to sound along both sides of the dormitory. "I'll shut the doors and explain to the girls," said the magistrate firmly. "You'd better go and prepare for tomorrow." Sabriel nodded and left, trying to fix her mind on the practicalities of the journey, rather than on what could have happened to her father. She would take a cab as early as possible into Bain, the nearest town, and then a bus to the Anastair. I knew that freaking word. I keep messing that word up. And Celestier perimeter that faced the wall. With luck, she would be there by early afternoon. Behind these plans, her thoughts just kept jumping back to a portion. What could have happened to trap him into death? And what could she really hope to do about it, even if she did get to the old kingdom? Chapter 2. Look at that, we got plenty of time. Chapter 2. The perimeter in Alisher and Celestier. It's a tough word. And Celestier ran from coast to coast, parallel to the wall, and perhaps half a mile from it. Let's see. Okay. Perhaps a half a mile from it. Concertina wire, I think that's right, concertina wire, lay like worms impaled on rusting steel pickets, forward defenses for an interlocking network of trenches and concrete pillboxes. Many of these strong points were designed to control the ground behind them as well as in front, and almost as much barbed wire stretched behind the trenches guarding the rear. In fact, the perimeter was much more successful at keeping people from my God, I'm having a time right now. Don't worry, you're with friends. Thank you. It's just one word, it keeps messing me up because it's spelled different than what it actually. And Celestier, and because it looks like Ancelsterior. And Celestier. The Old Kingdom was going the other way, preventing things. Okay, sorry. In fact, the perimeter was much more successful at keeping people from Celestier out of the Old Kingdom than it was at preventing things from the Old Kingdom going the other way. Anything powerful enough to cross the wall usually retained enough magic to assume its shape, to assume the shape of a soldier, or to become invisible and simply go where it willed, regardless of barbed wire, bullets, hand grenades, and mortar bombs, which often didn't work at all, particularly when the wind was blowing from the north and out of the Old Kingdom. Due to the unreliability of technology, the Alestrian soldiers of the perimeter garrison wore mail over their khaki battle dress, had nasal and neck bars on their helmets, and carried extremely old-fashioned sword bayonets in well-worn scalbards. Shields, or more correctly, bucklers, small perimeter garrison only, were carried on their backs, the factory khaki long since submerged under brightly painted regimental or personal signs. Regimental or personal signs. Camouflage was not considered an issue at this particular posting. Sabriel watched a platoon of young soldiers march past the bus, and while she waited for the tourists ahead of her to stampede out the front door, and wondered what they thought of their strange duties. Most would have to be conscripts from far to the south, where no magic crept over the wall and widened the cracks in what they thought of as reality. Here she could feel magic potentially brewing, lurking in the atmosphere like charged air before a thunderstorm. The wall itself looked normal enough, past the wasteland of wire and trenches, just like any other medieval remnant. It was stone and old, about 40 feet high, and crenellated. It takes time. No pressure. We literally are not physically there. Yeah. That's the best part about it. There's no one around. Yeah, it's all good. I have to fix this chair because it's so far back.
I lean back, it feels like I'm
gonna fall out of the chair. Oh, that's better. No, not cremated. Um, crenellated, which is like I guess would be like a castle, like, you know, has the, I guess maybe, perhaps I don't know. I wasn't very good at English. This is just me giving my best shot. Now, I've had plenty of time to try and get it right. Been out of school, what, 20 years now? It's crazy. Okay, let's see, where were we? Nothing remarkable until the realization set in that it was in a perfect state of preservation, and for those with the sight, the very stones crawled with charter marks, marks in constant motion, twisting and turning, sliding and rearranging themselves under the skin of stone. The final confirmation of strangeness lay beyond the wall. It was clear and cool on the Ayrshire side. Ayrshire, why do I keep saying? And Celtier. It's such a freaking stupid word. I'm already sick of looking at it. Industry term of that fucking looking up thing. Word thing. That fucked up looking thing over there. English is my second language, I have to say. I'm just thinking about learning a new language now. Hey, there you go. I know very little outside of English, so more power to those that can, because it's tough. It's tough just reading English. Where were we? Okay. Okay. It was clear and cool on the Ancestier side, and the sun was shining, but Sabriel could see snow falling steadily behind the wall. The snow heavy, clouds stirred right up to the wall, where they suddenly stopped, as if some mighty weather knife had simply sheared through the sky. Sabriel watched the snow fall and gave thanks to her almanac. Printed by leather press, the type had left ridges in the thick linen rich paper, making the many handwritten annotations waver precariously between the lines. One spidery remark, written in a hand she knew wasn't her father's, gave the weather to be expected under the respective calendars for each country. Ayrshire, damn it all, fucking shit. And Celestier had autumn, likely to be cool. The Old Kingdom had winter, bound to be snowing, skis or snowshoes. The last tourist left, eager to reach the observation platform, although the army and the government discouraged tourists, and there was no accommodation for them within 20 miles of the wall. One busload a day was allowed to come and view the wall from the tower located well beyond the lines of the perimeter. Even this concession was often cancelled, for when the wind blew from the north, the bus would inexplicably break down a few miles short of the tower, and the tourists would have to help push it back towards Bane, only to see it start again just as mysteriously as it stopped. The authorities made some slight allowance for the few people authorized to travel from Ancelstier to the New Kingdom, as Sabriel saw after she had surprisingly negotiated the bus's steps. Negotiated? The bus's steps with her backpack, cross-country skis, stocks, and sword, all threatening to go in different directions. The large sign next to the bus stop proclaimed, Perimeter Command Northern Army Group. Unauthorized egress from the perimeter zone is strictly forbidden. Anyone attempting to cross the perimeter zone will be shot without warning. Authorized travelers must report to the Perimeter Command HQ. Remember, no warning will be made. Sabriel read the note with interest and felt a quickening sense of excitement start within her. Her memories of the old kingdom were dim, from the perspective of a child. But she still a sense of mystery. But she felt a sense of mystery and wonder kindle with the force of the charter magic she felt around her, a sense of something so much more alive than the betumed parade ground. Bitumened. You figure it out. Betumed parade ground and the scarlet warning sign. And much more freedom than Waverly College. But that feeling of wonder and excitement came laced with a dread that she couldn't shake, a dread made up of fear for what might be happening to her father, what might have already happened. The arrow on the sign indicated where authorized travelers should go seemed to point in the direction of a, there's that word again, bitumen parade ground, lined with white painted rocks, and a number of unprepossessing wooden buildings, whatever. Oh my god. Get a drink of something. When exactly is this book based on? I think it said 1652, but this is like a fantasy. So it's a little bit of everything going on. 1652 was when it was established, the Waverly College. So sometime after that, I would I'm not sure just how long after. Probably 100, 200 years. It's a historical span of 600 years. Yeah, it's a lot. Okay. The arrow on the sign. Other than that, there were simply the beginnings of the communication trenches that sank into the ground and then zigzagged their way to the double line of trenches, blockhouses, and fortifications that confronted the wall. Sabriel studied them for a while and saw the flash of color from several soldiers hopped out of the one trench and went forward to the wire. They seemed to be carrying spears rather than rifles, and she wondered why the perimeter was built for modern war, but manned by people expecting something rather more medieval. Then she remembered a conversation with her father and his comment that the perimeter had been designed far away in the south, where they refused to admit that the perimeter was different from any other contested border. Up until a century or so ago, so we're getting a little bit of an idea, there had also been a wall on the Celestier side, a lowish wall made of rammed earth and peat, but a successful one. Recalling that conversation, her eyes made out a low rise of scarred earth in the middle of the desolation of wire, and she realized that was where the southern wall had been. Peering at it, she also realized that what she had taken to be loose pickets between lines of concertina wire were something different. Tall constructs, more like the trunks of small trees, stripped of every branch. They seemed familiar to her, but she couldn't place what they were. Sabriel was still staring at them, thinking, when a loud and not very pleasant voice erupted a little way behind her right ear. "What do you think you're doing, miss? You can't loiter about here, on the bus, or up to the tower." Sabriel winced and then turned as quickly as she could, ski sliding one way and stocks the other, framing her head at the St. Andrew's Cross. The voice belonged to a large but fairly young soldier, whose bristling mustaches were more evidence of martial ambition than proof of them. Okay. He had two gilded bands on his sleeve, but didn't wear the mail hauberk and helmet Sabriel had seen on the other soldiers. He smelled of shaving cream and talc, and was so clean, polished, and full of himself that Sabriel immediately categorized him as some sort of natural bureaucrat currently disguised as a soldier. "I am a citizen of the Old Kingdom," she replied quickly, staring back at the red, flushed face and piggy ears with the manner of which Miss Prionte had taught her girls to instruct lesser domestic servants in etiquette 4 IV. "Hey, Special 8. How are ya?" "I am returning there." "Papers," demanded the soldier, after a moment's hesitation at the words Old Kingdom. Sabriel gave a frosty smile, also part of Miss Prionne's curriculum, and made a ritual movement with the tips of her fingers, the symbol of disclosing, of things hidden becoming seen, and of unfolding. As her fingers sketched, she formed a symbol in her mind, linking it with the papers she carried in her inner pocket of a leather tunic. finger sketched and mind-drawn symbol merged, and the papers were in her hand. In an Alcestier passport, as well as the much rarer document the Alcestier Perimeter Command issued to people who had traffic in both countries. A hand-bound document printed by leather press on handmade paper. Check my computer. Ooh, it's getting warm. Sorry, we got 20 minutes and a few more pages. A hand-bound document printed on by leather press on handmade paper, with the artist's sketch instead of the photograph, and prints of thumbs and toes in a purple ink. The soldier blinked, but said nothing. Perhaps, thought Sabriel, as he took the proffered documents, the man thought it was a parlor trick, or perhaps he just didn't notice. Maybe charter magic was common here, so close to the wall. The man looked through the documents carefully, but without real interest. Sabriel now felt certain that he was no one important from the way he pawed through the special passport. He'd obviously never seen one before. Mischievously, she started to weave the charter magics for a snatch or catch, to flick the papers out of his hands and back into her pocket before his piggy eyes worked out what was going on. But in the first second of motion, she felt the flare of other charter magic to either side or behind her, and hearing the clattering of hobnails on the bitumen. You can see me better. Hey. Hobnails on the bitumen. You're gonna have to figure that out. I don't know what that means. I don't know what a bitumen is. Her head snapped back from the papers, and she felt her hair whisk across her forehead as she looked from side to side. Soldiers were pouring out of the huts and out of the trenches, sword bayonets in their hands and rifles at their shoulder. Several of them wore badges that she realized marked them as charter mages. Their fingers were weaving warding symbols and barriers that would lock Sabriel onto her footsteps, tie her to her shadow. Crude magic, but strongly cast. Instinctively, Sabriel's mind and hands flashed into a sequence of symbols that would wipe clean these bonds, but her skis shifted and fell into a crook of her elbow, and she winced at the blow. At the same time, a soldier ran ahead of the others, sunlight glinting on the silver stars of his helmet. "Stop!" he shouted. "Corporal, step back from her!" The corporal, deaf to the hum of charter magic, blind to the flare of the hand-wrought signs, looked up from her papers and gaped for a second. Fear erasing his features. He dropped the passports and stumbled back. In his face, Sabriel suddenly realized what it meant to use magic on the perimeter, and she held herself absolutely still, blanking out the partially made signs in her mind. Her skis slipped further down her arm, the bindings catching for a moment before tearing loose and clattering onto the ground. Soldiers rushed forward, and in seconds formed a ring around her, swords angled towards her throat. She saw streaks of silver plated onto the blades in crudely written charter symbols, and understood. These weapons were made to kill things that were already dead. Inferior versions of the sword she wore at her own side. The man who'd shouted, an officer, Sabriel realized, bent down and picked up her passports. He studied them for a moment, then looked up at Sabriel. His eyes were a pale blue and held a mixture of harshness and compassion that Sabriel found familiar, though she couldn't place it, till she remembered her father's eyes. Abhorsen's eyes were so dark brown that they seemed black, but they held a similar feeling. The officer closed the passport, tucked it in his belt, and tilted his helmet back with 2 fingers, revealing the charter mark still glowing with some residual charm of warding. Cautiously, Sabriel lifted her hand, and then, as he didn't dissuade her, reached out with 2 fingers to touch the mark. As she did so, she reached forward and touched her own. Sabriel felt the familiar swirl of energy and the feeling of falling into some endless galaxy of stars. But the stars here were charter symbols, linked in some great dance that had no beginning or end, but contained and described to the world in its movement. Sabriel knew only a small fraction of the symbols, but she knew that they danced, and she felt the purity of the charter wash over her. An unsold charter mark, the officer pronounced loudly. As their fingers fell back to their sides, she is no creature or sending. The soldiers fell back, sheathing swords and clicking on safety catches. Only the red-faced corporal didn't move, his eyes still staring at Sabriel as if he were unsure of what he was looking at. "Show's over, Corporal," said the officer, his voice and eyes now harsh. "Get back to the pay, officer. You'll see stranger happenings than this in your time here. Stay clear of them, and you might stay alive." "So," he said, taking the documents from the belt and handing them back to Sabriel. "You are the daughter of Abhorsen. I am Colonel Horsey." Horsey? Horsey. Horsey! Almost there, aren't we? Aren't we? Oh my goodness. We're still a few pages off. Commander of a small part of the garrison here, a unit the Army likes to call the Northern Perimeter Reconnaissance Unit, and everyone else calls it the Crossing Point Scouts. A somewhat motley collection of Alcesterians who've managed to gain the charter mark and some small knowledge of magic. "Pleased to meet you, sir," popped out of Sabriel's school-trained mouth before she could stifle it. The schoolgirl's answer she knew and felt, and blush arise in her pale cheeks. "Likewise," said the colonel, bending down. "May I take your skis?" "If you would be so kind," said Sabriel, falling back to formality. "Oh, my back." The colonel picked them up with ease, carefully retired the stocks to the skis, refastened the bindings that had come undone, and tucked the lot under one muscular arm. "I take it you intend to cross into the Old Kingdom?" asked Horace. Horace. I'm calling him Horace because that sounds a little less absurd and lewd. As he found the balancing point of his load and pointed it at the scarlet sign on the far side of the parade ground. "We'll have to check in with Perimeter HQ. There are a few formalities, but it shouldn't take long." "Is someone Abhorsen coming to meet you?" His voice faltered a little as he mentioned Abhorsen's. A strange stutter in so confident a man. Sabriel glanced at him and saw that his eyes flickered from the sword at her waist to the bandolier she wore across her chest. Obviously, he recognized Abhorsen's sword and also the significance of the bells. Very few people ever met a necromancer, but anyone who did remembered the bells. Did you know my father?" she asked. "He used to visit me twice a year. I guess he would have come through here." "Yes, I saw him then," replied Horsey, as they started walking around the edge of the parade ground. "But I first met him more than 20 years ago, when I first posted here as a subaltern. It was a strange time, a very bad time, for me and everyone on the perimeter." He paused in mid-stride, boots crashing, and his eyes once again looked at the bells and the whiteness of Sabriel's skin, stark against the black of her hair, and black as the bitumen under the feet. "You're a necromancer," he said bluntly, "so you'll probably understand. This crossing point has seen too many battles, too many dead. Before those idiots down south took things under central command, the crossing point was moved every 10 years up to the next gate on the wall. But 40 years ago, Retrucrat decreed that there would be no movement. It was a waste of public money. This was and is to be the only crossing point. Never mind the fact that over time there would be such a concentration of death mixed with free magic leaking over the wall that everything would not stay dead," Sabriel interrupted quietly. "Yes. When I arrived, the trouble was just beginning. Corpses wouldn't stay buried. Our people, our old kingdom creatures, soldiers killed the day before would turn up on parade. Creatures prevented from crossing would rise up and do more damage than they did when they were alive." "What did you do?" asked Sabriel. She knew a great deal about binding and enforcing true death, but not on such a scale. There were no dead creatures nearby now, for she always instinctively felt the interface between life and death around her, and it was no different than it had been 40 miles away from Waverly College. Our charter mages tried to deal with the problem, but there were no specific charter symbols to make them dead, only destroy their physical shape. Sometimes that was enough, and sometimes it wasn't. We had to rotate troops back to Bane, even further, just for them to recover from what HQ like to think of as bouts of mass hysteria or madness. I wasn't a charter mage then, but I was going with patrols into the Old Kingdom, beginning to learn. On one patrol, we met with a man sitting on a charter stone, on top of a hill that overlooked both the wall and the perimeter. As he was obviously interested in the perimeter, the officer in charge of the patrol thought we should question him and kill him if he turned out to be a bearer of corrupted charter, to bear a corrupted charter, or was some free magic thing in the shape of a man. But we didn't, of course. It was Abhorsen. And he was coming to us because he'd heard about the dead. We escorted him in, and he met with the general commanding the garrison. I don't know what they agreed, but I imagine it was for Abhorsen to bind the dead, and, in return, he was to be granted citizenship to Ancestier and freedom to cross the wall. He certainly had the two passports. Almost there. The two passports after that. In any case, he spent the next few months carving the wind flutes you can see among the wire. Ah, exclaimed Sabriel. I wondered what they were. Wind flutes. That explains a lot. I'm glad you understand, said the colonel. I still don't. For one thing, they don't make no sound, no matter how hard the wind blows through them. They have charter symbols on them I had never seen before. He carved them, and never seen them again anywhere else. And when he started placing them one a night, the dead gradually disappeared, and no new ones rose. They reached the far end of the parade ground, where another scarlet sign stood in the communication trench, proclaiming perimeter garrison headquarters. Call and wait for sentry. The telephone handset and the bell chain proclaimed at the usual gastronomy of the perimeter. Colonel Horsey picked up the handset, wound the handle, and listened for a moment, then replaced it, frowning. He pulled the bell chain 3 times in quick succession. Anyway, he continued, as they waited for the sentry, whatever it was, it worked. So we are deeply in debt to Abhorsen, and that makes his daughter an honored guest. I may be less honored and more reviled as a messenger of ill omen, said Sabriel quickly. She hesitated, as it was hard to talk about Abhorsen without tears coming to her eyes, then continued quickly, to get it over and done with. The reason I am going into the old kingdom is to look for my father. Something has happened to him. I had hoped there had been another reason for you to carry his sword, said Horsey. Sorry. He moved the skis into the crook of his left arm, freeing his right, in return to salute of the 2 sentries who were running at the double up in communication trench, hobnails clacking on the wooden slats. There is worse, I think, added Sabriel, taking a deep breath to stop her voice from breaking into sobs. He is trapped in death, or may even be dead, and his bindings will be broken. The wind flutes? Asked Horsey, grounding the end of the skis, his salute dying out halfway to his head. All the dead here? The flutes play a song only heard in death, replied Sabriel, continuing a binding laid down by Abhorsen. But the bound are tied to him, and the flutes will have no power if Abhorsen is now among the dead. They will bind no more. And we have come to the end. The next time we meet, next Saturday, we will start Chapter 3. It is now time to raid our friend MP with perfect timing. If any of you would like to discuss this, please do so in our Discord. I hope you all liked it. I hope that I didn't bore you all too much. Let me catch up on chat while we're waiting on MP. Let's see. We can see better. Yesterday was nuts, but in the middle of a 3-day weekend. That's what's up, weekend. Happy weekend. Thank you, Avatar. Slept in. Reaction injection mold setup technician. How the heck you do? You have energy. Work on getting well and sleeping over time. Go, Kriz, go! Speedrun. I was speedrunning. I was hauling ass, trying to. My son found a pet rock last week. Oh, I'm going to stream putting eyes and naming it. Oh, that's cool. Had a TikTok name for comments. It's just calling it Rocky. Rochelle Pope. Dude, Rocky is legit. Because your fuse is very. Oh, thank you. In a manly way. Thank you. Yeah, Rocky, or let's see, what else could you name him? You can name Rocky. You can name him Rock On. You can name him Stony. You can name him Pebbles. You can name all kinds of things for Pet Rock. How about I don't know. Pebbles is clearly Flintstones. That's kind of taken. So what's up, MP? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? I turboed through it as fast as I could. 2020, man love is accepted. More like bro love. Yeah, it is bro love. Yeah, it's definitely bro love. Lots of love around here. I am so glad you all are here, and yeah, once again, I hope you all enjoyed it. My computer is not completely fried yet, so that's good. Kapow. Let's check. Let's see if I can't believe I didn't have my thing here. This right there. I can't believe that. I didn't have that up at the very beginning, but that's okay. If anyone sticks around and watches the whole thing, they'll figure out. Happy Saturday! It is time for phase 2 of the Saturday raid party right here on Twitch. That's right. Phase 2. We're going to MP next. After that, stick around because at 9 o'clock we're going to JMac. And that's when Chatterday begins and the real fun begins, because then it's game time and it's time to have fun and kick some ass and, you know, do all that good stuff, you know. I'm really blurry when I do that. That's fast, like a flash. Oh, I'm on the intro screen. Thank you for reading into this, Kriz. Is this Kriz? Christopher? Kriz? Sorry, nickname. Just Kriz. It's Chris, but I go by Kriz on here. It's K-R-I-Z. Like Zorro. Let's see. MP. Where is MP? Oh, there he is. Alright, bye everybody. Or just stick around. I'm going to do the raid. Thank you, MP. You're welcome. And thank you all for being here. And thank you, MP, for listening to the prologue for the 3rd time. And then finally, it must be rewarding to finally be able to hear chapter 1 and 2. It's an awesome book. It gets a lot better. It gets a whole lot better. This is just kind of the introduction of what's going on. All right, this is it. It's raid time. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye. See you next time.